Hello and welcome to NC Central's Writers Morning Out, a free gathering of writers of any level and any genre, sponsored by the North Carolina Network. I'm Carol Phillips. The network's fall conference is being held in Asheville the first weekend in November 1 through November 3rd. It's always a great conference, and registration is now open. Sean Charles Winslow will judge this year's Doris Bates Fiction Contest. The submission deadline is October 31. So if you're going to enter, good luck. And you can find out more about the conference and the Doris Bates Fiction Prize on their website. Thank you, George, as always, for hosting our meeting on Zoom. We all appreciate your efforts in doing this. It's great. Couldn't do it without you. This afternoon, we will hear from MaxieJane Frazier and Tracy Crow, who will announce the winners of our Flash Prose contest. MaxieJane Frazier, if I can pronounce your name right here, MaxieJane Frazier is a writer, editor, and educator, a creative writing professor for the Southern New Hampshire University's MA in the English Creative Writing Program, a published author and a full-time editor, coach, educator, and writer. She engages in the practice of editing every day. She earned her book development certificates from Queen's University of Charlotte, her MFA in fiction and nonfiction from the Bennington Writing Seminars, and her PhD in literature from the University of Delaware. Mighty Blue Editing is her editing umbrella. Max's superpower is maintaining an author's voice and vision while helping develop thematic themes, consistent plots, and readability. For a quote, you can email her. All of the contact information is in chat. She keeps two retired National Park Service Mighty Mules, Buck and Festus, and two lovely generic old horses, Natty and Cooper, excuse me. You can find some of her work most recently in Cleaver Magazine, Sofo Ho Joe Booth, I can't pronounce that word, MaxieJane, I never have, the Ecstatics Review?
Ekphrastic.
Yes. The Bending Genres, the Line Literary Review, the Wrath-Bearing Tree, and as the judge's selection in Volume 6, Snow Crow of the Bath Flash Fiction Contest. Max is also a hardcore introvert who loves to listen and will happily talk your ear off. Tracy Crow is a literary agent and president, CEO of Millspeak Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated towards supporting and publishing creative works of military veterans and family members through its imprints, Millspeak Books and Family of Light Books. She is also author, editor of 6 books, and adjunct teaches at 2 MFA creative writing programs. She also holds eagerly awaited monthly craft discussions for Writers Morning Out on the last Tuesday of the month, January through October. Steevijane Parks is joining us to read the winning entries. She's a retired clinical psychologist who became both a professional artist and a professional voice actress later in life. She recently completed her audiobook narration training program, as well as a commercial and narrative program through an online voiceover school called Such a Voice. Please feel free to contact MaxieJane, Tracy, and or Steevijane Parks about their various services. I've put their contact information in chat. So now I will turn this over to Tracy and Maxie, and thank you again very, very much for doing the judging and doing this program for us.
Yay. Yeah, I'm unmuted. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for carving out this time on a Saturday. It's getting a little cloudy around here, so good time to come in anyway, right? We are just super, super thrilled to be with you guys today. We had so much fun talking about all 15 entries in this year's Flash. And we broke down every single one of them. And we almost got into a fist fight. No, we just really had so much fun talking about craft and all of the elements that we saw within every single one of them. In a minute, I'm going to turn this over to Maxie and let her talk about like what are the vital components of Flash for those who are just, you know, dipping your toe into that pool of Flash and beginning to understand. And so that when we go through the finalists and then the top 3 winners, you'll be able to kind of see how we arrived at the decision that we did for these particular finalists and the final winner. So with that said, Maxie, would you like to take over and talk about the vital components?
Absolutely. And let me just pop in really quick and go through. I just have some visuals for you to help see what I'm talking about, because I'm somebody who has to read to learn. So I just wanted to be sure that I shared these with you as well. And so the vital elements of Flash fiction are the same as almost any story, but they come in a more compressed form. It's, you know, a pint-sized story, but they always pack a punch. And so Flash can be so many different things. It usually has to do with word count, but it also will have a complete narrative arc. And it's kind of unfair to call it an arc as much as it'll have an intentional shape sometimes. It doesn't always have a beginning, middle, and end, but you can see the author making purposeful shape. But there's always some type of character arc. The character's worldview will have shifted by the end, or maybe the readers, and it'll have these elements of fiction. So often you'll find that they'll start right in the middle of the action, in medias res. And again, there'll be something complete to do with the narrative shape arc, the character arc, but there's action, things happen. We're kept really interested. And the end isn't quite the end. It keeps them thinking, right? It keeps us as readers thinking, but that last line will typically keep ringing. I like to call it like a bell tone perfect chime, you know, it makes us go, oh, at the end. And you'll usually find that these stories are ripe with sensory details, and or like there will be a lot of symbolism or rich figurative language happening. And there's often a shift, a surprise, a twist, something that makes us sit up and pay attention. Your own Katie Schultz from North Carolina has these easy words that all begin with S to think of it. There'll be a great setting. There'll be an important situation. There'll be sensory detail. Simile refers to figurative language, and often there'll be a shift. And I don't mind if I'm going too fast, I can always send something to Carol to send out to the rest of you so that you can have these notes. And finally, I just want to put that simply. Hook your readers in the beginning. Give us something with purposeful shape. Pay attention to the point of view you choose, and stick to one point of view in something as short as Flash. You want relatable and real characters. You want a setting that is both like tangible, but also that puts us there in the scene with sensory detail. And try out all these other things that I talked about. There's some fantastic Flash craft books. If this is something that interests you, I recommend all 4 of these books. And there's so many more. These are just the tip of the iceberg. And I'd be happy to provide a list through Carol if you would like. There's also some great collections to read. Fractured Lit has several volumes that are wonderful. Brevity is the best of the best in nonfiction Flash. Norton put out this Flash Fiction America about 2 years ago, and it's new and fresh. And Snow Crow is just one example of the volumes that the Bath Flash Fiction Contest in the UK puts out that are collections of Flash. So all kinds of opportunities for you. And that's it.
Maxie,
I hope if you have any questions,
in.
I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah, while we let everyone unmute to ask or write them in the chat, then let me just ask, you're so in that world of Flash. I'm not. But I love Flash. What is it about Flash, fiction and nonfiction, that seems as if it's suddenly taken off, especially in the last couple of years? Is there some reason?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of reasons. And one of the easy ones to just throw out there is the shorter attention span that people seem to have towards reading, which is unfortunate. But what's so amazing about Flash is that it creates a really close-up look at a moment, at our world. And usually, you'll have a situation like some kind of plot happening, but that story we read that is so short will provide us a bigger story that gives us insight, that gives us wisdom, that helps us see the world in a new way for having read it. So it's both the intensity of observation and it's this opportunity to feel like we almost learned something, which is unfair. That's a little didactic, but by the end, we've seen this shift and it helps us see things differently too. And I think it's very akin to poetry. And from this, wishing I understood poetry better person, I find Flash more accessible and easier to understand. So I think that's part why it's all taken off. Did I miss anything, Tracy?
Yeah, no, it's perfect. Thank you. I needed to hear that. And when you say that, it kind of helps us find a little bit of ourself or our own story. That reminds me of memoirist and instructor Patricia Hampel, who has that saying, "You give me your story, I get mine."
Yes.
I quote that all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's such a great point, because one thing I didn't say in my flash through all those slides is that Flash fiction and nonfiction really relies on the reader engaging and participating in the story. It can't just sit by itself. It requires you to be an active participant in the story because it's compressed, because there's so much implication, because we expect people to understand what's happening with the layers of meaning that happen with that figurative language, with the symbolic setting, those kinds of things.
Thank you. Thanks. Do you have any other questions about craft related or otherwise about Flash? Did I miss anything in the chat about that? Let me just make sure. Is chat so popular because Jody says, hi Jody. She says, is chat so popular because our attention spans have gotten shorter in the digital era? Probably. Yeah. Okay. Did I miss anything else? Okay. Any other questions? And by the way, feel free to unmute if you'd like, if you don't want to type it in the chat, but you do have the chat too. Okay, if there are none, are you guys ready to find out what our process was and how we narrowed these down and which ones we've chosen? Okay. Let me say this. I don't think we did this last time. We were trying to figure out among ourselves, like, how did we do this last time? But I'm pretty sure what we did not do was show you the pieces on the screen. I think everybody just heard the reading of the pieces, and then we explained a little bit about what we liked about each one and why we ranked it where we did. But this time we thought what we would do is, as Stevie is reading the piece, we're going to share a screen so that you can read along. And that way, when, hopefully you'll be able to digest and absorb a lot more in terms of craft. As Maxie and I go back over certain parts of it, you'll still have it on the screen where you can refer to it. That way you can see it and hear it at the same time. Does that make sense? But what that also means is that when I go to share screen, am I doing it, Carol? Am I going to share screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When I go to share screen, it means I'm only going to see a few of you over here on the side. So please, 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 after the reading, when Maxie and I are talking, if you have questions, please unmute yourself, because I won't know if you're over here going like this to get my attention. Okay, so please, just pipe in. All right. That's the downside about going to share screen, it seems. All right, so if we're ready, what's going to happen is the minute I share screen, you're going to see the first honorable mention. Now, we ranked what we felt like were the top 5. And we have 2 honorable mentions, and then we have a 3rd place, 2nd place, and then the overall winner. We don't have time to go over all 15. I wish we did, but I do hope that what we discuss about these will help all the writers with the others absorb enough where they go, oh, I see where I can go back and tweak, because every one of them is just like a few tweaks away from having been right there in that top 5. Okay, you ready? All right.
And as you're pulling the screen up, I just want to add,
Yeah.
Wow, 15 amazing entries. It was tough to bring it down to 5.
Thank you.
It was.
Hey,
Oh, we had so much fun discussing them, let me tell you. Okay. Share screen. Let's see if I can get this right. Okay. Can everyone see that? Can everyone see?
Yeah,
I need to
yes,
somebody
yes.
on the
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to make sure, and then I want to make sure I can move my little thing as we go down. Okay, I need this thing to work over here. Oh, there we go. Okay, so you can see our first honorable mention is Miracle Mushrooms. And Stevie, if you are ready to take it away.
Okay, do you want me to read the author's name?
Hold on a second. I am going to mute myself. Yes.
Yes, okay. The first one is called Miracle Mushrooms. It's by Sandra Fisher. Mama was sick and needed an operation. The doctor told her, no mushroom hunting for you this spring. You must rest for 6 weeks after the surgery. That made her sicker, and she moaned, I might as well be sent to prison. Hunting morel mushrooms was the highlight of Mama's life. They were rare delicacies that only emerged in warm, moist woodlands for a short season during the month of May. Mama said missing the hunt was more painful to her than the operation might be. After the surgery, we kids tried to comfort her. Don't worry, Mama. We know just where to go and how to find them. You just rest up. Off to the woods we went, searching among the rotting remains of dead elm trees and mayapple ground cover. We wielded sticks to ward off snakes and poked at shriveled leaves, hoping to spy the spongy gray or golden spikes that sprang up on ivory stems. Uncovering one prompted the finder to call, I found one! Then everyone would scurry to the area to scope out more. Mama was the one who called out the most, but that spring, no calls rang out. It seemed the mushrooms decided not to appear because she wasn't there. As Mama recovered, she spent time in the side garden checking the tulip bed. One morning, we were awakened to a high-pitched scream. Oh, Lordy, Lordy! Scrambling outside in our PJs, we found her laughing, tears streaming down her face. Can you believe it? It's a miracle. Among the tulips were several morels standing tall, waiting for someone to pick them. We reckon God sent them to Mama because she couldn't go to them. They had never appeared there before, and they never did again. They were her miracle mushrooms.
Sweet. Thanks, Stevie. What a wonderful reading. Thank you. Okay, does it help that you guys can actually see the words too and see the craft elements? Great.
Yes.
Their X-ray reading, 3D glasses on as the craft pops out. Maxie, you want to start and talk about a little bit about this one and what we really liked about it?
Yes, definitely. For one, we loved the hook. Mama was sick and needed an operation. Right there, we're like, what's going on? We want to know what's happening. And because the authors open with something so interesting, we want to keep on reading. Some other larger little things that we love are the positive message. There's so many great details like wielding the sticks or the spongy gray or golden spikes. And so we feel like we've been taken out on the mushroom hunt with this person. And so there's all these pieces of it were so exciting for us. And should I stop at positive and let you go, Tracy? And then we'll talk about something.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Talk about what we would like to see maybe this tweaked a little bit more. Go ahead.
Right. And so there are so many wonderful things happening in this piece. When we come to the end of it, we're still trying to draw a connection. Here are these magic mushrooms. And what is that greater meaning we're supposed to draw from it? We get a sense that the mushrooms and their magical appearance is connected to Mama and how much she means. But could there be something more, like a layered meaning? Could we push this to say that we are gaining insight or meaning because the mushrooms will only show up for mama. We understand that at a rather literal level, but how could the symbols, how could the choices of figurative language where there's simile and metaphor happening, how could those be fine-tuned to help us create bigger meaning and more insight?
Yes, exactly. Love the dialogue too.
Oh, yeah.
In flash dialogue is important that it, just like with fiction though, that it really be succinct in the sense that it tells you a message on a deeper level, not just the chit chatty stuff of everyday stream of conscious type dialogue. So, I mean, this was really great, spot on, very punchy dialogue. Yeah, it was I think the ending more than anything, that we felt like we just weren't quite there, but it was so close, so close. Are there any
Definitely.
questions about this one? Anything anyone wants to mention? And Stevie, can you tell us the name again of the author?
Sandra Fisher.
Sandra, are you with us today?
No, she was unable to join because she's celebrating her husband's 90th birthday.
Oh, wow.
90th. Oh my God.
90th, yeah.
Wow.
But
Okay.
she's looking forward to seeing the recording. So
Okay. Oh, that's right. Great. Great. One of my favorite parts about this one is that hunt that Maxie was talking about. I love the fact that we're like, you just rest up and then the next language is off to the woods we went. It's that transition right there, which is so positive. And then all the different images there. We wielded sticks to ward off snakes and poked at the leaves. I mean, all that's great. I think the only other thing that we discussed that we would probably want to point out is that it sounds as if they're on the hunt right now, but then the verb tense, mama was the one who called out the most, makes it sound as if mama is with them in this particular hunt. So, it kind of like, it's just a little bit fuzzy there. If this is the day they're out there and they can't find any, or if this is just one of the description of a general hunt that they go on every year. So I think an attention to verb tenses. I know a lot of authors are really leery about, delving into the whole past perfect tense, but sometimes you need that at least once in a paragraph to make sure that the reader understands we're going even farther back. So in time. So that was the only other thing, since she's listening or will be listening in the future, we'll say, look at that paragraph, because that was just a little bit off there on some of those verbs. But other than that, we loved it.
So well done.
Yes, I know. Are we ready to go to our second honorable mention? Dum, da, da, dum. Okay, it is Echo. Okay, Stevie.
Echo by Penelope Cottrell. Aminta clings to Samuel like the plastic wrap Mother uses on her famous potato salad. Mother and Father yell downstairs, and Father's words thunder up the staircase. Aminta looks at the closed door, their protector. Samuel whimpers. Aminta shushes and rocks him in the far corner of the room, where it will take Father the longest to reach them. The yelling crests like a wave and retreats to silence. Aminta buries her face in Samuel's hair, which smells of Johnson's baby shampoo, and reminds her of the days when Mother and Father didn't yell so much. The silence brings hope that tonight won't be like last night. Samuel lifts and turns his head on her chest, and Aminta feels his hot tears through her nightshirt. His breath hiccups and stutters in the way breath does after crying. Mother's scream pierces the silence. Aminta's body stiffens, and Samuel cries and cries and cries. "Please be quiet," she whispers. "You'll make Father upset." But the cries drown her words. Sometimes when Father isn't home and Mother is happy, Aminta and Samuel make their voices echo in the hallway. This is when Aminta feels free. Footsteps boom up the stairs and echo along the hardwood hallway. Aminta knows there are 17 steps to their room. She closes her eyes and counts as each step comes closer and closer and closer to the door. The trapped feeling floods her body. She holds Samuel and inhales the shampoo smell. More footsteps climb the stairs. Mother. Aminta knows there are 15 stairs, 32 steps in all to the door. She rocks and counts, rocks and counts. The door opens. A crack splits through the air and father falls to the floor. Mother stands behind him, holding a frying pan.
Wow, right?
Yeah.
Penny. Girl, who are you channeling? Okay. We absolutely love this one, didn't we?
Oh, we did. We
Yeah.
absolutely did. And it just goes to show you how tight this was, right?
Yes,
Gosh.
yes.
So I'll kick off with some of the stuff we loved, right?
Yeah.
This hook really establishes this young narrator telling us the story in the present tense. And this figurative language clings to Samuel like the plastic wrap Mother uses on her famous potato salad, reveals so many things like how does it mean to see the world? And that the mother's potato salad is famous tells us there's sort of this exterior image this family puts out, but we know that it's a mask because of what we're about to witness, right? So going back and reappreciating the hook, it took on more and more meaning with the rest of the story. And there's just such vivid figurative language, which is my favorite part of flash fiction. So the plastic wrap, of course, but also the way that the voice thunders up the staircase, that there's the crest like a wave and retreats to silence. So wonderful. The sensory details, like the comfort in the Johnson's baby shampoo, and the way that the author returned to that comfort when the father was coming, knowing that she's just clinging to what brings her comfort. Then the hiccups, we all know what that sounds like. It's so relatable. The hot tears soaking through the shirt, and then he's booming up the stairs. And that feels like a relationship to thunder. So all of this works so well. The setting is so rich. We very much understand that the situation is an abusive household, but it's the story of the mother's basic instinct breaking through to protect her children. And so all of those things, we were just so excited and so intense. And it just puts a cold chill on me. And honestly, one of the things that's tough in Flash is you just can't afford to have a reader drawn out of what's happening. And I mean, we're right there and the action's coming and father's coming. And then suddenly it's like there's 17 steps for the father. Are we already counting the 15 that show up for the mother? And then when it's 32 in all. So all of a sudden we were doing math and pulled out of the story, which is a little bit unfortunate because it's such a great detail to know she knows exactly how many steps to count. And yet the fact that there were 17 and then 15 and 32, it just brought us out of the story when we were so intensely worried that these children were about to be severely injured by their father. That part was tough, and it kind of muddled what was so great about what was happening. And so then finally, because this really is about a mother who says, that's it, this is the last time I am making this stop, we wanted maybe a few clues or a little bit of something to help just be polished into this piece to tell us why this time. Why is this the time that the mother whacks him over the head with a frying pan when we know that this is a common occurrence? So there's just got to be a little bit of something that brought this one to be different. And I mean, these are just fine-tuning suggestions. What an exciting and terrifying piece.
Yes, totally agree. And while it's really super interesting that this young girl knows exactly how many steps, remember that just even slipping that part in, she's counting the steps, and it could be a single number. Like, that way we're not pulled out with several different numbers being mentioned, like the 17 steps and the 15, then the 32. So if it's just one mention, then we realize that she's counting and she knows precisely how many. And that's such a great point about like, why this time? Why now has the mother had enough? So a hint of that somewhere infused in there. and a little bit of tweaking on the step part. And I think this is just like, wow.
Right.
I know, because there was so much great stuff in there. Penny, oh my God, woman. You had us like, our hearts were going.
Right.
Gosh. Does anyone need to take another look, or does anyone want to say anything, or anyone have any questions yet? Anything else? Okay, we're ready to keep going. My screen, jumped a second ago on this little arrow thing down here, so it's already popped up. Okay, so for third place, and you may have seen that a second ago, third place we felt like belonged to COVID Skateboard Blues. Okay, Stevie, take it away.
COVID Skateboard Blues by D.K. Broadwell. There's that racket again. Out my office window, a young girl in the middle of the street is practicing heel flips on her skateboard. She can't be more than 10 or 11. Over and over, she tries to do a 180 and fails with a noisome clatter. Trapped in my house by the pandemic, I'm a prisoner of this acoustic torture. She never gives up, and I turn my boomer rock and roll in a vain attempt to block it. The next day, she's back at it, slowly getting better. She still falls, but not as much. I do admire her determination. She's as much of a pandemic prisoner as I am. But in my case, I'm trying to get real work done here. I'm too much of a coward to confront her parents. I don't need a punch from an overwrought redneck pissed off about the lockdown. That night, I go to my garage and rummage in my scrap heap. After a few hours of sawing and nailing, I'm done. The most accomplished I've felt in months. I'm surprised by this, but shouldn't be. I felt so numb since my wife died of COVID. Any feeling is an improvement. In darkness, I take the skateboard ramp I built and place it on the girl's porch. I found one of the kids' old bike helmets and gave her that too. The next day, she's in the street, using the ramp and making more noise than ever. She may or may not give a damn about who gave it to her, but I own the noise now, and somehow my life is a little better. I wish she'd used the helmet.
Ah, this was such an amazing piece and so indicative of the pandemic, right? This author has captured a feeling that I would venture to guess every one of us on this call has experienced, the lack of control that comes with something like the lockdown, right? So some of the things that are our favorites with it is the relevance of this story. There's just such subtle and heartbreaking details slipped in about the wife's COVID death that really, it's so quietly offered to us, and yet it's the central conflict to the entire piece and makes all of it like it's a central turning point for the story. So this structure is almost like a radiating circle from the middle of the story, and it makes us understand everything that came before and really take in everything that comes after. And so we wanted to complement things like that last line, I think, is our favorite part, is, but I own the noise now. So we see the control has happened. We see that all along he's unable to control the noise that is happening. He's unable to control that his wife has passed away from COVID. He's unable to control that he's at real work. What an amazing word to choose, because she's at real work too, right? And we're asked as readers to make that juxtaposition and realize his understanding of real work might shift by the end of this story, which it does, right? And then he controls making the ramp and feels different because he's finally accomplished something that mattered to him. And that pulls into this big resolution with, I own the noise now. But there's still a little lack of control because he says, I wish she'd use the helmet. And some of the things that we would love to have happen is, for example, the first lines, like maybe the first sentence, the first two sentences should be our hook for the story. And so that beginning with the word theirs, is already a little bit distancing. That's a little bit of an indirect sentence. And so while the racket is what matters, it's at the end of that sentence and we're already losing touch with the actual visceral feeling of that noise. And what goes along with that is we would love to see him using some figurative language, not just telling us there's a noisome clatter, but telling us maybe that clatter is like something we as readers would recognize, a shattering glass over and over again, or something that really tells us just how irritating this is. And then even more sensory details. So while this is so profoundly interesting and heartbreaking and draws me personally in as a reader from my anecdotal experience with the pandemic, I want to viscerally be in this story. I want those sensory details, and I want to be part of this slight healing that happens for this author at a very sensory way.
Yeah, thank you, Maxie. That was great. Yeah, we really spent a lot of time talking about this. And she's so right about that opening line and just a little tweak. I mean, and I'm always stressing to my students to take the word there out of their vocabulary, basically THERE, because here's what happens. And not that it happened in this case, but here's what happens. It comes from a stream of conscious place of writing. It's not a more purposeful, artful place of writing. And it is coming from this narrator's, stream of conscious, perspective. And so that makes it not quite as bad, but here's what happens. Typically what happens when that word begins a sentence, 2 or 3 more of those at the beginning of sentences fall on that same page. Fortunately, it did not happen here, but I've had to go back through like with student papers and MFA classes and just like yellow highlight all of them along a page so that they can finally start to see it actually does create a writer's tick. And so anytime we're pulling up from the subconscious type, stream of conscious type of writing, instead of that purposeful, how can I make that sentence be as absolutely perfect and artful as it possibly can, even if it began the racket, blah, 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 like blah, 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 began again. You can see how that would allow for a little bit more of some figurative or sensory language in there, instead of there's that racket again. So it's nice that we're brought in and hooked in for a character, but we don't have any context yet. And so anytime it starts that way too, it also throws us off without some immediate context for who's doing the speaking here. So much to like. We love the shift. If you'll go back and think about everything on those slides that Maxie shared, I mean, this comes so close with lots of the shift and the change and the way the way the narrator changes and the way we might change along as well. I would say just to humor, I would say play with this maybe in a third person point of view, just to see how it comes across on the page so that the reader becomes more of a fly on the wall and gets to watch it kind of unfold. And I say that just because sometimes third can do things, every point of view has its strengths and its weaknesses. But the first thing I thought of when I think of third in that is, have you seen that commercial where there's the elderly gentleman who can barely get out of bed and he starts lifting weights and the neighbors are shaking their heads and they're like, what is this guy doing? And, the guy looks like he's, about 90 years old and he starts lifting. And at first he can't lift anything. And then a few weeks later, he's getting stronger. And we don't have a clue where this is leading. And then the very last scene, he walks in at Christmas, lifts his granddaughter up to the top of the tree so that she can hang the star. And that was what he had been training for all that time. And so because we're the fly on the wall watching and we only get a certain amount of details, then it kind of, creates another type of layering. So I'm just saying there's nothing wrong with the first person point of view, but it might be fun to play with it and just see if it doesn't come across maybe a little even more artful. Does that make sense? Maybe? Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, hi.
There he is.
Oh, we like this so much. Oh, we talk and talk and talk.
Yes,
it was a real strain to channel my inner grumpy old man, but I was able to do it.
God, somebody's got to do it, right? Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention that we didn't know which pieces were fiction and which pieces were nonfiction.
Right.
So that we just looked at all of them in the same way and judged
Right.
them all along the same elements as if they were just all one genre. Okay. I meant to say that. So, and
And
by
if you
the
don't
way,
mind,
DK,
I-
when we were talking about this, we were also saying when it got to the part about my wife, and we both assumed that this was a man, and we thought, oh, wait a minute, we gotta be careful there because you can no longer assume. You
Right.
know, it could have been, a she. So we kind of caught ourselves there too. And that's good. Sometimes a little bit of ambiguity is interesting. It actually adds another layer for people to discuss and wonder about. Go ahead, Maxie, were you going to say something?
Oh, and I just want to emphasize what a great example of a beautiful character arc. This person definitely changes across the course of this narrative. And that was just so like emotionally fulfilling for me.
Yeah. Yeah. We really, really enjoyed this one. Okay.
Thank you. Beginner's luck.
Well, keep going, beginner. All right. Now we go to our second plays. Try not to let it jump too far ahead. And that is First Contact. Okay, Stevie?
First Contact by Leslie Selbst. He first noticed her while loading his laundry into one of those new high-tech dryers. The gum-cracking ponytail and short cutoffs made her look to be about 15, but the hard eyeshadow and bright red lipstick indicated deeper experience. She carried a small load of wet clothing and a fistful of quarters. Her need was evident, but he had taken the last available machine. The coin slot had space for 4 quarters. He had but 2, and the bill-changing machine in the corner sported a warning in purple crayon. This machine eats money and shits nothing. His offer appeared innocent enough and a logical solution. She looked him over. He has puppy dog eyes, she thought. He admired her smile. Her glance at his ringless hand showed an uneven tan. Margie, Jim, they blurted together, their words coming out as marjoram. He smiled. Personally, I prefer butter. She laughed, though she didn't think it that funny. He reached for her clothes. She hesitated, then accepted. They sat in awkward silence, staring at their clothing cavorting in the dry heat. Well, looks like rain, he offered. She nodded and smiled. 4 quarters later, their conversation warmed. She waited tables, but was in cosmetology school. He was in sales, but didn't say what. Her favorite movie was Sleepless in Seattle. His was Silence of the Lambs. They both loved basketball. The dryer buzzed and they giggled as they sorted through their clothing. He asked for her number, but she hesitated. Her last love was married, and she vowed not to repeat that error. In the end, she gambled. At home, she folded her still warm clothing, excited at the possibilities. Then, a pair of toddler socks slipped from a folded towel.
Thanks, Stevie. By the way, you're doing such a great job with these reads. Thank you.
Yes.
Isn't this one fun too? less, the cavorting in the dryer. How did I not
Possibly
know
my
that?
favorite line, right?
I know. We both were just loving this. Go ahead, Maxie. Talk about what you like.
Well, we're definitely hooked on that first line. He first noticed her while loading his laundry into one of those new high-tech dryers. And if you're asking readers to participate in your flash, this is a moment. Every one of us, think, me for sure anyway, knows what a public laundromat is like. And you've set us in a setting that you don't have to go beyond a high-tech dryer, because a public laundromat is something we know. And even if we haven't been in one, we've seen them in the movies. And so you got to do a shortcut. The author got to do a shortcut by putting us in a place that we already know. There's so many other things we love too, cavorting in the dry heat. The marjoram is such a fun, we know something about the author when the author is willing to make these little moments of humor. And there's just this characterization, like through their clothing, gum cracking, the ponytail, but also the lipstick. We have this person who is sort of worn and world worn, but seems so young at the same time. And there's other characterizations happening. We're witnessing her make them by looking at his ringless hand that showed an even tan. And their favorite movies, what incredible details. You know, she's Sleepless in Seattle, he's Silence of the Lambs. We know as participants in the meaning making for this flash, they are never going to work with that kind of difference between them. And that moment when it says the conversation warms with the four quarters is such a nice tie into what's happening inside the dryer too. We know this author is asking us to find meaning, like freighted meaning happening throughout this piece. Everything is working together. And the cavorting is almost like watching porn. You know how we all stare at, clothes in the dryer, and yet here's her underwear mingling with other things. We did have a couple of questions about things that are happening. And the most important one, if we're using publishable quality as one of the standards for how we are looking at these pieces, for me, the most important one is that something is happening here called head hopping, which is we start out this piece very firmly in the third person limited point of view with the male character. And there's a very real shift from the male character's interior view to the woman's interior view. She looked him over, and then she decided that she could, go with him, right? In that moment of the switch, we go from watching his point of view to her point of view. That kind of thing can happen if you can establish a clear, omniscient narrator. And then when you have a different voice that's telling us about that scene, as opposed to the interior voices of these people, that other voice can see inside their heads. That's what the omniscient means. And you'd have sort of a back and forth of what he was thinking, she was thinking, but all from a separate and distinct voice that is your omniscient narrator. Otherwise, head hopping is kind of like whiplash for your readers. We go from one guy to the girl, right? And then a little piece of this, I mean, it's got such a great emotional truth of burn me once, she's not going to let it happen again. So the story sort of ends up being about her at the end. And at home, she folded her still warm clothing. So it's right away, such a nice detail, excited at the possibilities. Then a pair of toddler socks slipped from a folded towel. And strangely enough, just like we weren't supposed to make too many assumptions about the wife in the previous story, was the narrator male or not? What is the meaning behind toddler socks slipping out? Does our character have a toddler? Does the male character have a toddler, but is a dad that shares custody because his ringless finger doesn't show a tan? So maybe he's actually somebody who's pretty amazing because he's washing his child's clothes. I mean, there's so many possibilities that happen with this, that when we're looking for that big shift or that big at the end, the toddler sock possibly isn't creating the effect that's intended. I think we know that we're supposed to go, oh no, this means he has a family. But there's other clues that say that he maybe isn't living with that family, or there's other possibilities. And so a contemporary reader goes, wait, I can read this differently. And we're required to give this meaning. As readers, we're participating in the meaning. So don't provoke us. Don't make us go, wait, I can read this differently if I want to. So you want to help guide us to that shift and that we know. But a simple slip into omniscient narrator would solve the problem with head hopping. And there could be just another clue, including maybe lingerie, whatever it would need to be that slips out of the towel. That would be a stronger clue of what the author intends for us to take from it.
Yes, because as Maxie and I were talking about this earlier this week, it's not as uncommon anymore for men to be single dads or to have a lot of custody and then be carrying and washing clothes and all this. So we weren't really sure what to take from the ending. Did she feel as if this was something that should have been brought up because it's such a monumental thing in one's life to be a parent, and yet it never comes up in the conversation? So is she thinking at this point, if he isn't going to be this upfront with me about something this huge in his life, then what else is he withholding? So, she's right. There are a lot of ways to take this. And in Flash, we want to feel like it's okay to have some ambiguity, but we want to have and some resonance at the end, but we want to kind of know if we're headed in a right direction at any rate. Does that make sense? And did I get that right, Maxie?
Definitely. And we're just in love with this piece and want these small changes to happen because you should be sending it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Way to go, Les. Woo!
I'll tell you my thoughts when I was writing this.
Okay.
It's the first Flash fiction I've written, and I'm in with a short story group, and I was experimenting with the idea of to have a resolution or not. And so I thought it would be interesting to let the reader draw conclusions. It could be this was a community dryer. Who knows where those socks came from? But she was gambling, and she was looking forward to possibilities. And now all of a sudden, doubt crept in. So that was the purpose of that ending. But
Keep
thank
in
you.
mind, because Maxie said something really, really crucial about the ending. And so let's go back to that 1 second. We don't know for certain whether those toddler socks don't belong to her toddler. And maybe she's the one that withheld. And maybe the toddler socks falling out remind her of her responsibilities. So you see how it can go that way, and we're just not quite sure.
I tried to show premonition with, he was very secretive during their discussions. He didn't give too much information. So he didn't say what he sold or any of that nature.
was good.
So
Mhm.
that was part of the buildup, I thought. Anyway, that's what it is. Thank you.
Yeah. Well,
And
we loved it.
we did notice that. We commented on him withholding what he sold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just weren't sure if we were quite on the right track with the toddler socks. And again, a level of ambiguity is fine in that moment of
Sure.
resonance. But if it's maybe like just too much, or we're just not really sure whether we got it, then it maybe is worth taking another look at and seeing if it can't be tweaked, or if the setup leading to it can't be tweaked just a little bit.
Mhm. Just
Okay.
a little bit more of a shove.
Yeah. Great. Now, are we ready to see the one we selected as the winner out of 15? Drum roll. Ta-da! Raw Umber. Okay, Stevie, take it away. Who is this one by?
Raw Umber is by Jennifer O'Brien. It started as a tiny little painting, a gift for the stepfather she hadn't spoken to in years. Someone she hoped to never speak to again. "You can't give that to him," her brother said. "That man was a monster." Agreed. She loaded her brush and continued to paint. The project had been inspired by her neighbor, a septuagenarian she'd often felt obliged to make conversation with when walking Milo or pruning the bushes that ran along the fence. In a moment of nervous and awkward interaction, she'd asked him the secret to a happy life. "I paint," he told her. "I paint for those I have yet to forgive." The idea possessed her almost immediately, for she desperately wanted some relief from the ancient angers that writhed and twisted around her heart, interrupting her sleep. Her dining room became an artist studio that very afternoon. She opened herself up to the work with abandon, layering fury over fury in somber browns and oranges and the occasional midnight blue. And yet, despite her every effort to find a source of forgiveness in the pigments, she only managed to pull up deeper roots of pain and exhaustion. Canvases filled her trash bin, small ones giving way to increasingly large pieces, each one failing to offer the solace she sought. She wasn't an artist. She didn't know the first thing about composition or contrast. Her efforts at unconditional love failed at every turn. One night, in utter despair, she rang her neighbor's doorbell at an unreasonable hour. "I can't do it," she said, holding a still wet canvas up to the dim light of the porch. But the man just smiled and reached out for the painting. "I beg to differ," he said, and invited her in for tea.
Thank you, Stevie. And yay, congratulations. Is Jennifer with us today? No?
I am.
Oh, hi. Hi.
Hello.
Congratulations.
Thank you so
Congratulations.
much.
Have you written much Flash before?
I had not written Flash until this opportunity, and then I came up with 2 pieces.
Oh my gosh. Okay, did you submit both pieces or just this one?
Just this one.
Okay. Max, do you want to start?
I do want to start. And how exciting that this is your first Flash.
I
Please keep writing it. And we loved so much about this. And one of my favorite things about this piece is each time I read it, and this time when I heard it, there's new meaning that keeps evolving from it. It continues and continues to engage me and ask me to draw more out of it. And so that is my very favorite part of this piece, because it becomes more and more profound for me every time I read it, every time that I'm a part of it. And so we love that we're drawn into this idea, this secret to a happy life that the septuagenarian gives her. And so the fact that she's painting as something that he offered, what I picked up this time that I hadn't on the other times is that she has interpreted what that is supposed to be. So the first painting is a gift for the stepfather, yet the septuagenarian never says that he gives painting to anybody, right? And this is an exercise for her in unconditional love. And for him, he invites her in for tea, right? And we don't get to see this interchange about how this has been meaningful for him and what it has meant for her, but we do witness this profound shift in the character from the beginning to the end, as the character claims that she is not a artist, that she is working in these dark colors that we see so viscerally, the browns, the oranges, the occasional midnight blue. We can almost picture the Hudson River artists who would have given us these colors and the angst of what is happening on the canvas. And so all of that is just incredible. And one of the lines I love, Tracy will say she doesn't love as much, is her efforts at unconditional love failed at every turn. And I thought having that insight into the character's intent in all this artistic work was amazing. Tracy will probably talk a bit about, we didn't need that spelled out so much, but sometimes I need things spelled out. And I struggled at the beginning with this piece, and part of that was the joy, the trying to pull the meaning out of it was part of what made it so wonderful for me to enjoy. What I picked up on, things that were difficult for me, was that she has yet to forgive, and the unconditional love is starting to have meaning now for me even more today as we listen to this. So my notes are not going to fully function for me because I'm like, I get it even better. But I wanted more sensory detail and a little bit more of the scenting. I would have loved to know, what did the smell of those, possibly acrylic or maybe oil, because it's still wet when she takes it to the man's front door. I wanted to know what that smell meant to her. I wanted to know what it meant to pick pieces of paint off of fingers. Like, what did the whole visceral experience of this do to her, in addition to all these other things that are happening? And honestly, I'm going to pull back a little bit because Tracy is going to wax eloquent on this. But I just want to say, what a pleasure, what a complex story. And thank you for the opportunity to read it.
Yes. Okay, so when I first read this, I was sitting outside under the trees in my backyard. And when I reached the ending, I literally burst into tears. I mean, and then I read it a second time, And I burst into tears again. And I thought, what is happening? And this piece just really, really, really grabbed me from the very beginning and spoke to me. So let me kind of go through some of the things. And these were some of the things that Max and I talked together that I want to point out in terms of craft. Just the first couple of sentences alone almost give us a glimpse of a life story, because we're already understanding that this is for a gift for a stepfather she hasn't spoken to in years and really hopes to never speak again. So right away, we're kind of like, okay, what's going on here? What's going to happen when she gives him this gift? Because of course we're thinking, this is how it's going to start, and she's going to give him this gift. And then that the brother comes in just this beautiful line of simple dialogue. You can't give that to him. That man was a monster. And she agrees, and yet she continues to load up the brush and continue to paint. So within such a tiny, tiny scope of space, we already have life. We have a lot of life material that's going on. And then we come to this part where she's inspired by the neighbor, and we just again get this little piece of like what her life is like with this neighbor who's a septuagenarian, and she'd felt obliged to make conversation. So that again tells us a little bit about her withdrawal, her hesitance, maybe his age, maybe he's too much like the stepfather. We don't really know yet. I will say that whenever there's only one thing that gets a proper name, like the dog, then it jumps off the page at me, and I want to know why. And so, Jennifer, if your dog is named Milo and you just picked a name out of the hat, then don't tell me that, because I went and looked it up. As I have a tendency to do when there's only one thing named in an entire 300-word masterpiece, I'm going to go look it up. And the root of that is Milu, which is merciful. So I just like, whoa, this is gorgeous. And then she's bringing up the pruning of the bushes along the fence. The fence serves as a border. The pruning is she's trying to control a certain amount of chaos in her life. So there's the pruning, and the fence is kind of between them. So there's that border. I mean, there is so much going on here in such a tiny space that it just gives me so much joy every time I read this. And so even in that moment of nervous and awkward interaction, she's asking him the secret to a happy life. So she's keeping the fence between her. She's keeping some of the chaos at bay, but she's willing to ask that question. And then she apparently is somewhat surprised by this answer. He paints yet to forgive, and the idea possesses her almost immediately. So here we've got the action. She's changing. We've got the entire dining rooms become the artist studio immediately. And we've got this figurative language about the layering fury over fury. We have the colors. Anytime and a writer inserts colors, we want to pay attention, because those colors have meaning. It's just the same thing with poets. Every word usually has at least a double meaning. So oranges and browns represent certain things. So does a midnight blue. So we want to think about those and like how are they actually contributing to the piece? So here's another part that we both just loved so much about the canvases are filling up the trash bin. We're getting this visual imagery. Notice how small ones giving way to increasingly larger pieces, each one failing. In that, how I interpret that is that her will toward this and her heart toward this, once closed like a fist, is now opening, and the expression is getting larger. The desire to forgive is getting larger and larger and larger as the pieces become increasingly large pieces. So the effort is there. We're seeing this huge shift from, yes, he's a monster, to huge canvases. And then she kind of falls back, because whatever it is she's creating, and we don't know if it's abstract, we don't know if she's trying to create something, that's realism, but whatever it is, she declares herself, she's not an artist. And then also this mention of composition and contrast, which, she doesn't know the first thing about composition or contrast. For me, I took that all the way back to her childhood, and whatever she was going through in childhood, she could not have a place for understanding, for the composition of it, for the context of what it was, and for the why of why her stepfather was treating them the way that he was and was this monster. So I felt like her efforts at unconditional love failed at every turn. I personally, if I were the editor of this, I would be encouraging Jen to consider striking that, only because I prefer to have the story and the details tell me that and unfold, rather than being told how I'm supposed to interpret it as the reader. Sometimes it does help, I agree. And that is completely Jen's, decision there. She can choose to leave it in. She might want to get more feedback to see how everybody falls on that, whether they felt like they needed it, or whether they felt like all of a sudden they were being told how to think and how to feel and how to interpret this. But then we have more action again. That one night in utter despair, she rang her neighbor's doorbell at an unreasonable hour. Now, of course, we don't know whether this is still, nighttime before dawn, or if this is, after midnight or whatever. We do know she's not able to sleep often because of what's said earlier. So we're assuming that it's late. And then she holds this still wet canvas up to the dim light. Those, while they don't tell us exactly what the colors are, we can still infer and still draw on images that our mind comes up. But for me, it sent me back to her as a child would hold up something to a parent for approval or for something, and then she says, I can't do it. I just can't do it. So when he reaches out and smiles and says, I beg to differ, and then invites her in for tea, this is where Max and I drew very different conclusions, and it's important to hear what they are, because they're both possible, they're both excellent, and again, there's a certain amount of ambiguity. Is it too much? I don't know, but let me just share. For me, I took it my first couple of reads that the man's kindness was, like he was being what the stepfather never was. He was, I beg to differ, giving her the approval she had longed for, ever since childhood, apparently, and invites her in for tea. Another way to take it was the way Maxie took it, which is really interesting. She took it as being very ominous, that the septuagenarian invites her in. I mean, is there something really dark and ominous going on there that he invites her in? And when she told me that, and I went back and read it that way, I thought, oh my God, that makes the piece even richer and on another layer, because is she falling for the same act again? And is she going to fall for the easy smile and maybe the false praise that she's been longing for, and go inside and will something ominous happen? What we don't know, of course, is whether she ever goes in. We don't know. And that's, I think, really cool about this. We don't know. We don't know whether she's going to go in, whether she's going to fall for the smile and the invite. We don't really know. There's something about this that continues to go, but I love that two people can have two totally different reads about that, and yet it still feels complete. Does that make sense, Maxie? Did I cover all that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I've been talked over to the other side too. I can read it both ways just by the dim light, which is also possibly warm. I mean, I picture a yellow glow off of that, and that's positive. So I waver, and I love that I can't decide. Some of the very best stories don't land us clearly in one place, but the pathways. I mean, this is interesting to say right after we wanted more from the laundry, the first contact piece, is that this exploration has some possibilities in both ways. But what's exciting is that she stepped outside of that border. She stepped outside of that maintained space that she has, and she's trying something new. So the character shift is really clear in this. Although I did forget one tiny piece of advice that I meant to say, and I want to end on your, enthusiastic positive. But the one thing for sure I'd change is that first word in the story. It is a indirect way to begin a sentence, and it would be very easy to make it something like, the tiny painting started as a gift for her stepfather, and you wouldn't have to have it in there at all. Okay, sorry, keep going.
No. Perfect. I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's the same thing as with there. THERE, you know, when it does that, it's kind of like outside of something, when all we have to do is just flip the order of the words, and it has a much stronger, you know, opening. Was I going to say anything? Oh, the sentence variation, I loved. It just masterful. There was just so much about this I just felt like is so masterful. And the subtlety of so many things. And then how much happens in such a short, compressed amount of space in words, an economy of words, the dialogue spot on between, you know, just the one line or so. I paint for those I have yet to forgive. Wow. You know, it just like that. And then the idea possesses her. And then we have their dialogue at the very end, which is very short, very succinct, and yet incredibly meaningful, every bit of it. Jen, have we helped you at all? Congratulations.
Sorry, I'm so slow there. Absolutely, yes. Thank you so much for your feedback. And thanks so much. I mean, I really enjoyed all of these stories this afternoon. Everything's that just, I don't know what to say. I'm a little overwhelmed right now. Yes, you helped me in some very specific ways, and I am going to be making some changes. And thank you.
Can we ask a question? Which way were we supposed to read the ending?
I'm very much a believer that any writing is a cooperation between, you know, the writer and the reader.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
I mean, I just truly believe that. And I also believe I don't know what happens when and if she crosses that threshold, but the idea of a threshold was what I wanted to bring her to. And so that's, and the story for me was just very much an exploration of the process of forgiveness.
Oh,
So nice.
We just loved it. And the fact that, you know, it was like Maxie was talking the other night, she does come out and around the fence because she has to go to his place. So she's already broken out and away from that border that she'd kept there, and is now on his porch. So that spoke so much. I mean, there was just so much going on in such a tiny, tiny little space. And, you know, we just felt like running out of batteries.
Oh, God.
Excuse me? Was somebody else saying something? Anyway, we just felt like it was masterful. We loved it, and still do, and can't read it enough. I want to share it with all my college students and get them to break it down in terms of craft. And by the way, now you can say, do you have a dog named Milo?
I do not have a dog named Milo. No.
So how did you come up with a name? Yeah.
Yeah, did you purposely pick Milo for some reason? Did you know what it meant?
I did not know what it meant, but I did search for the right name for the dog, and the dog did have to have a name. So
now, Zell, see, isn't that something? You know, there was this instinct within you that you had to name the dog. And I can remember as a journalist and taking some classes at Poynter Institute down in Florida, which is the premier like journalism school. And they said, for reporters, always when you're reporting on a story, always get the brand of the beer, the color of the high heels, and the name of the dog. Whenever you're covering this, and I've never forgotten that, like the brand of the beer, the color of the high heels, you know, and the name of the dog. So when that dog's name popped up, and when I went back and it was the only name, I just want everyone to understand that that is purposeful craft, and yet done in such a subtle way, you know, without any sort of, you know, lights over top of it or anything, but it's for us to absorb and to get and to see with like that X-ray reading vision we've been talking about, like in our last couple of craft sessions with me, and then the one Judith and I did, that reading, X-ray reading as a writer. So you start to notice these elements as they jump off the page at you. So Jen, that's great. That's great.
yeah, thanks so much for your feedback and help. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and that you named the neighbor the septuagenarian. I mean, it's just great. I mean, it's great. Are there any comments anybody wants to say, or any questions for anyone?
I would just like to thank Tracy, MaxieJane, and Stevie for reading wonderfully. It was just totally engaging. And Jen, and I want to congratulate all 5 of our finishers, and I can only just imagine how good everything else must have been too, and what a time you had. And Jen, I especially wanted to say hello. We've missed you, and congratulations. My reaction to this story, just as Stevie was reading it, was I was completely swept away by the emotions. The emotions were just engaging, and I think if I had been reading it alone, I might well have burst into tears too, Tracy.
I just can't explain, Jen. It just was overwhelming. 2 reads, and I was doing that, thinking, I'm out here under the trees. What the hell is going on here? It just reached into my soul and grabbed me. Maybe I need to start painting to forgive somebody. I don't know. Jeez.
So efficient, but thank everybody for participating, but especially the writers. Wow.
Yes. I wish we could share all of them. Thank you all for giving us such wonderful reads and such wonderful conversations. We were able to discuss these, and we just had so much fun going through them. And so I hope this has helped some with narrowing some things down in craft and showing that it helped that you were actually able to see the piece while Stevie was reading. So, okay, we'll try to remember that worked this time, and we'll try to do it next year too. All right. Congratulations, Jen. Carol, is there anything else? Maxie, anything anyone wants to say?
Just another very grateful thank you to you and Max for the time and expertise that you have spent in doing this, and to you, Stevie, for doing such a wonderful job reading it. It's just really great. And congratulations to all the finalists. I think that really shows that we have some really great writers in this group. So thank you all.
Keep writing, everybody. Okay, congratulations, everyone.